Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, do you remember the old satanic panic of the 90s? Do you guys remember back in the day when nearly every video game or nearly anything mature related in the world of video games was oftentimes called for a ban, or censorship, if you will? I remember when I was younger, there used to be a mom that would tell us that Pokemon was against religious principles because it really promoted dogfighting, superpowers, I guess polytheism. And, growing up, I really realized, man, what a crock of shit. This person clearly hasn't played Pokemon whatsoever. You know what I mean? Like, oftentimes, I feel like people can really control the censorship of things who don't really touch video games at all. Now, a couple days ago, you might have noticed I made a video about an organization known as Collective Shout. Now, Collective Shout is an organization that absolutely went out of their way to shut down a bunch of Steam games, if you will, too. They actually reached out to payment processors like Visa, like MasterCard, and they basically told them, hey guys, there's a bunch of naughty games on Steam, we should remove them. Now, of course, I want to just jump out by saying that, in a lot of cases, losing games like Incest Fister 5000 isn't personally affecting me. And to be honest, if that game doesn't exist on Steam, it does not bother me. But for a lot of games that they were targeting, you really had to turn off all of the filters, go through the big saloon doors to see all the gooning material on Steam right there and then. Now, the thing about it is normally I would not care about this if this organization wasn't also trying to get basically anything adult banned. Now look, throughout time, there has been a lot of cases where big media has all jumped into dogpile video games for mature themes. I think one of the most infamous things that I remember, and I was there for as it happened, was when Fox News basically threw Mass Effect under this big bus in front of the entire world and told everyone that, whoa, there was some graphic gooning available. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Mass Effect 1 has romance options, and one of those romance options can allow you, a human being, to have sex with an Asari, which is basically as closest to a female octopus-like evolved person that you can find. So basically it's girl-on-girl stuff, and of course Fox News wasn't ready to have it. In fact, they brought on a games expert, Jeff Keighley. And I think there's just one quote from this interview that should absolutely tell you all you need to know about any of the people raising outrage about video games or video game violence.
2 minutes out of a 30-plus hour experience
and Jeff,
to destroy this character,
something.
Commander Shepard.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. I have not played this game. I went on the website today. I clicked on a lot of different trailers. I tried to learn as much about it as I could before we did this. It's interesting. When you click on it, it asks you your age. It says you must go through a scanning process. So I thought, oh, this is going to take forever. Okay, so I put in my age, and then, boom, you're in. No problem. So that is a pretty easy screen to get past.
I absolutely cannot fucking stand the... it really fucks with me when, you imagine flipping on Fox News as an adult. You're like, what's that sex box they've been talking about? I know I bought little Billy an Xbox, but what is this new video game features full digital nudity? And of course you got the host with this smug little smile. You've got this fuck with the smug little smile. And you got Jeff's soul leaving his body. She basically just said, I never played the game. In fact, just before I came on national television, I went to the website. I just watched the trailers, maybe looked at the Wikipedia article, called it a day. She didn't even engage with any of this. Now, of course, obviously, buying an M-rated game, you go to the store and they'll ask you, hey, your parents say yes or no? And if your parents will just say yes, then it is what it is. I'm sorry to say, that's just kind of how the world usually worked back then. But they misrepresented a massive game that was billed as an M-rated title. I mean, she literally said it. It was a title that was billed for people that were over the age of 17. Legal fucking adults at that point. I mean, if they're going to be consuming mature related content with violence, sex, and mature themes, yeah, of course they are. It's a game that's marketed to them. Now, if you're going to ask for Mass Effect to be banned, you might as well just ask straight up for Brokeback Mountain to be removed from existence. Look, at the end of the day, these are fucking adult games, okay? And much like organizations such as Collective Shout, they will oftentimes latch on to any of these tiny nothing burgers and blow them up into big controversies just because they know that the fucking boomers that watch them and listen to them and the actual skeletons in the government that listen to them will never actually play the games and fucking verify it for themselves, which I think think is goddamn criminal in some ways. Now, of course, obviously there are some times where these people latch on to actual tragedies too and actually find a way to blame video games. Back in the day when I was growing up, there was a massive university shooting. Some of you remember it as Virginia Tech, the Virginia Tech massacre. And it basically had, while it was going live, I remember it was going live on the television. I was actually watching it with my parents, family, friends. Like, it was just all over the news. And literally as it was happening, I remember one of the things that got brought up was Counter-Strike, a game that I was playing pretty actively as a kid at the time. And the thing about it is, obviously, again, Jack Thompson, some of the most insane fucking activist, disbarred fucking attorneys, decided to jump onto this bandwagon and immediately blame video games to be responsible for these massive tragedies. In some cases, as they were happening live. I mean, boys, the bodies aren't even cold yet. The maggots have not even arrived. And yet we are trying to find a way to push our actual agenda. I mean, it should be transparently disgusting to anybody that's watching this stuff, but generally you can't really win in the outrage machine, especially when the audience that is watching you actually doesn't care about engaging and researching with the materials to begin with. So anyways, this whole long diatribe for me was literally just there to kind of show you how this stuff sort of begins, right? Again, to look at Collective Shout, one of the things they had thrown at them was this one Vice article by Anna Valens. Group behind Steam censorship policies have powerful allies. So she started to look at this group Collective Shout because they actually surprisingly had quite some wins. I talked about a last video where they actually did get GTA 5 removed from a store shelf. So one of the screenshots they showed was the main character with the actual, first-person viewpoints. This would be the PS4, Xbox One version of the game, it seems. And they would have the hatchet ready, and this woman would be dead in front of them. So again, they're misrepresenting the game right here. It's a game that encourages player to murder women for entertainment. The incentive is to commit sexual violence against women, then abuse or kill them to proceed to get health points. So again, it's a blatant lie. Again, if anybody's played Grand Theft Auto 5, which I'm sure a lot of you have, you know that the main story is about three horrible criminals, Michael DeSanta, Franklin Clinton, and Trevor Phillips. Okay, I was kind of blanking on the last name there for a second. But that last character is a goddamn cannibal. In fact, the best character of this entire franchise, or this game, would be Franklin Clinton. You know, he's probably like the most grounded, maybe the most empathetic. But that doesn't stop him from carjacking and killing a whole bunch of gang members pretty much out of nowhere sometimes. So yeah, this is a game about killing, carjacking, performing heists, making money, and trying to escape and try to make something of yourself in the city of Los Santos, okay? That is probably the most quick explanation I can give it. Realistically, it's a long single-player game that has a written story, it's designed in a cinematic way, and nowhere did I ever encounter me picking up health points like it's some fucking 90s video game every woman that I've murdered. In fact, the reality is, if you want to kill people in Grand Theft Auto, you can kill anybody regardless of their gender. The actual fun reality is the more people you kill, the more innocent people in general, the more mayhem you cause, the game responds with you by sending the law enforcement after you in an escalating fashion. Now, the thing about this organization is obviously the more that people started to look at it, because it wasn't just about the gooning games, right? It was about anything they found disrespectful. Now, Collective Shout, for anybody that doesn't know, is an organization that I believe is secular, but it is led by people that are, again, pro-life, pro-abortion, feminism, all of that stuff. They're very, like, sort of right-adjacent individuals, very much in line with wholesome, religious values, if you will. And I've got nothing against that, okay? If you're a religious person, great. I am too. I, however, keep everything of my relationship to God within my four walls, okay? As soon as I leave my house, I don't ever want to push my beliefs onto my neighbor, as I don't want to hear about their fucking beliefs at the end of the day, okay? We live in a world where, again, we decide as a society what is okay and what isn't. And as long as, you're not hurting anybody, live how you want to live, okay? And that means when we release games on online platforms, as long as they're not actually violating the law, as long as they're not actually breaking anything, we shouldn't be punishing individuals. We shouldn't be forcing payment processors to enforce their morality or ethics on us. The same payment processors that actually don't really even give a shit about human beings because they've been involved in so many cases regarding the adult industry, and their indifference is actually quite well documented until, of course, their hand is forced, much as it was with Collective Shout. So to go back to this Vice article, what was interesting is it was posted, but obviously it was then removed a few days later. So it shows me that obviously Collective Shout isn't just this simple grassroots organization. They're people with actual pull. You know, when you have enough pull to get Grand Theft Auto out, when you have enough pull to effectively get, you know, a massive organization like Vice to remove an article out of nowhere, it starts something known as the Streisand effect. And of course, then other publications like Notebook Check, PC Gamer started to look really deep into this. And of course, this is where Anna Valens ended up going out and saying that Savage Ventures, the company that owns Vice, requested I no longer contribute to Vice shortly after 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So according to her, because of that article, Vice was contacted by their owners and said, that bitch gotta leave, okay? She has got to go. That person has got to get out of here. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not okay, all right? And if you have a principled view in life, you should probably see the problems that I'm raising here. And again, other, journalists came in and said that they're going to be quitting Vice because of this nonsense. Now, again, I don't know anything about this simply because I don't work at Vice. I don't know anybody at Savage Ventures. Again, she could be lying. They could be lying. This could be a totally different story. But again, it seems as if that, Collective Shout really didn't appreciate the veil being opened, and people starting to look a little bit deeper into their misinformation campaigns. And you can tell very much they don't really care about the women and children, especially when they go, I commend New Zealand for caring more about women than Australia seems to right now. Because they succeeded in New Zealand and Australia was like, all right, you can have a couple things, you just can't have the whole fucking pie. The group has written a letter to the minister arguing that granting Eminem's entry to perform a series of local concerts makes a mockery of the Commonwealth's national plan to reduce violence against women and children. Because it's really Eminem and Snoop Dogg that are raising the whole pile of violence against women and children, right? But we'll get to that in a little bit. Obviously, they did succeed in some cases, like to get Tyler, the Creator, removed. And of course, obviously, Grand Theft Auto 5 had a successful campaign where they prevented the sale in Australian retailers. So obviously, to get down into it, the individual behind here, Melissa Tankard-Reist, the person that is the founder and the runner of this, has went out and said all these porn-sick, rotted gamer fetishists so desperate to get their hands on incest games, they're now exchanging clues on how to find them so that they don't die all overnight. But again, this is an individual that misrepresents all of their stuff. Again, these people succeed because they target sort of the extreme ends that most people don't care about. Like, I don't care if an incest game gets removed. But when I look closer into their organization, they very much target the extreme ends, so then they can work their way to the center. Because nothing stops Melinda from going after something like Cyberpunk 2077. She might be outraged that by going to Jig Street in the game and buying a Joy Toy for an hour might be something that promotes violence against women or children. Maybe not men, maybe she doesn't give a shit about men, I don't really care to know, but she might find that to be bad. Even though it's an M-rated game, it's not a game that promotes it quite heavily. It's a game that, yes, I understand that maybe me buying an hour of the Joy Toy's time probably means that's the Joy Toy earning enough to buy a goddamn burrito or something, right? It is what it is. But the reality of it is that this is an M-rated game with mature themes and subject matter. She really doesn't have to jump in and remove everything from existence just because children and women could possibly be affected by these games, which there is no scientific proof that they are. She has not provided it. She just makes this claim for no reason. The other thing, too, that gets me is, like, obviously, there are other games with highly sexualized themes. Imagine if she poked her fucking, crosshairs towards something like Baldur's Gate 3, which is a unanimously loved game, simply because you can have sex with pretty much anything in that title. Now, one of the things that I wanted to also bring up in this stuff, too, is that Melissa promotes something. Melissa is very charitable to things that are actually more harmful to the things that she's actually went after. So for instance, one of the actual posts that I saw from her blew my mind. Some thoughts on hashtag cuties and why I'm not joining calls to ban. So that name might hit you like a goddamn truck, but for anybody that doesn't know, Cuties was a movie that was on Netflix for a brief period, and what Cuties was about was ultimately the objectification of young girls, the society they live in, and how the things around them, the social media, the pressures that they face, kind of put them in a place where they grow up way too fast and they over-sexualize themselves. Now, this movie, if you've, I guess, actually watched it and you've seen the actual message, they say that this is bad. It's a movie that doesn't promote it. It's a movie that kind of has a point, I believe, at the end where, like, you know, the main character, the girl, actually is in, like, a shocking state of affairs and wonders, you know, what happened? Like, why am I here? It's a movie that's not, it's supposed to be a disturbing movie. That's the goal of it. But the thing is, ultimately, it used real children, real actors, and it promoted them, put them in promotional material that had them scantily dressed. Meaning that, again, these were real children that were unfortunately victimized in the promotion of this movie and in the spread of this movie too. So I want to see what Melinda thinks about this. So she made this long fucking Facebook post. Following a global uproar and a petition fast approaching 500,000 signatures, Netflix issued a statement saying, "We're deeply sorry for the inappropriate artwork that we used for Cuties. It wasn't okay, nor was it representative of the French film which won an award at Sundance. As supporters know, my antenna is highly tuned to the sexploitation of girls, since I first wrote Getting Real." So she took pause when she read this tweet by Flannery O'Brien. "I've seen the film. It is realistic about the horrible pressures placed on young girls and costs they face for choices forced upon them it is affecting. And heartbreaking, Netflix has marketed very exploitatively. No surprise." So according to her, I have reservations, even with the actress being 14, not 11. Of course, this is still very young. Yeah, it's very young. You got me there, honey. But if Cuties really does seriously critique the way so many girls have been indoctrinated from birth into the false idea that adopting roles and behaviors is freeing, maybe it could help contribute to amending the serious and destructive cultural norm. So again, this is the same dumb fucking person that decides now it's great to have this nuance over Cuties, which actually did use real actors, real underage people, and they promoted them in a very disgusting way. And I think most of the world agrees there. But why is it that your organization went after games like Detroit Become Human that showed fictional scenarios where a child was being abused in that stuff, you know, physically. And you, as a gamer, had to actually break out of the Matrix in it and save this child and escape with them. You know, it's a game that also was a mature experience. It showcased real trauma that occurs on a day-to-day basis in a respectful way, I would say. Why? Especially in that case, when every single thing and actor and character in it was a fictionalized 3D render. Again, it's insane to me that these people are unable to see the forest for the fucking trees. She is unironically defending a movie that has, even if it's criticizing the victimization of these little girls in this manner, has actually victimized those girls in the promotion of this movie material. She is so fucking brain dead that she cannot see that, but then immediately moves her crosshairs to video games or other fictional media, especially when it comes to censoring and pushing their overarching goals, which is all that this is about, okay? None of these organizations give a flying fuck about kids. None of them give a shit about women. None of them give a shit about the men. None of them give a shit about any human being. What they care about is that, in their mind, the world should be this puritanical fucking place that should never have an ounce of violence. We should never be able to listen to any form of rock music. We should never be able to we should never be able to have some gambling mini games and video. We should never be able to play some Grand Theft Auto. In their mind, the perfect world is going back to the goddamn 1500s and never sinning in their mind, okay? That is the perfect world for these people. And they will try to achieve it in any way possible, even if it means misrepresenting, misinforming, and oftentimes completely making a mockery of this entire situation. Now, before I end this video off, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I want to talk about is how this entire organization actually really exposed, in some cases, the real censorship mechanism. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, the real actual people that we should be looking at too, beyond just collective shout for raising all of this hullabaloo around, violent or sexually charged video games, is the payment processor. So again, going back to Valve, remember when they actually just a few days ago had this entire update? Content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers, in particular certain kinds of adult-only content. So this is Valve basically saying that it's not our systems, it's actually rules that belong to the payment processors. So they're actually putting the blame on companies like Visa and MasterCard. So again, don't let this, do not deviate from the attention away that this is suddenly us against this crazy puritanical organization or us against Steam. It's actually really the payment processor that decides when the censorship comes in or not. This is actually the bigger demon worth fighting in the story and where the attention should be raised. To give you an idea about how this works too, it's such an obfuscated system of content that obviously when we go to some of our big banks, for instance, right? Like this is Chase Bank. I think it's JP Morgan Chase. And the thing about it is it's one of thousands of banking institutions in the United States of America. So when people talk about, getting debanked because of, you might not have a belief that's mainstream, you might have done something that has effectively rendered you untouchable, a lot of banks don't just cut ties with you. If one bank cuts ties with you, it's not the end of the world. Because there are thousands of financial institutions in the country, you can just go to another bank. Realistically, the actual focus is how obfuscated the payment processing side of this is. So if you look up how many payment processors there are in the United States, there's really not a whole heck of a lot, and a lot of them go through some pretty stringent regulations, specifically in New York and I believe California. To give you an idea, who pays for something like Chase Bank? Well, it would be an underwriting organization. So these are, again, banking institutions that I believe specifically cater to a lot of these credit institutions. So these are the guys that effectively get to decide what is a purchase that they can support and what isn't a purchase that they can support. So let's say you've been debanked by any of these organizations. Your payment processors are effectively blocked from any company that you set up. You effectively cannot operate a business in the United States, especially when it comes to things like e-commerce, or even if not e-commerce, just going to the retail brick and mortar store, you are basically blocked from accessing a majority of services. Let's say that you're not even running a business. Let's say that you're somebody that has been blocked from PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, any of these agencies. You may even find it difficult to book an Uber, for crying out loud, right? Because you're just not able to interact with a payment processor to help transact your payments. And there have been big people like Elon Musk, from what I understand, has absolutely been going out of his way to try and get a payment processor license for X. But a lot of these organizations, PayPal, MasterCard, a lot of the old guard, from my understanding, has gone out of their way to prevent any new players from jumping into the space. Simply because they control this industry and they just have a lot of lobbyists, especially in places like New York, where it becomes sort of the most chief battleground to fight under. Realistically, these organizations, again, I want to stress, they do not care about the morality and ethics. These are the silent individuals that can control what you and I consume. These are the arbitrators of morality, ethics, and ultimately censorship in our society. If we do not have laws that allow fair and easy access for every single person to have access to a banking service, then there's no point in having things like freedom of speech. There's no point in having things like freedom of expression, because you cannot live in a world where these people can control access to that freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And I understand these are private companies, but even somebody who wants to live in the public world, banks and payment processing is almost a requirement, more so than just the internet or anything of that nature. This is a basic necessity, just access to money and financial services. If the private industry can control every single aspect of that without any option for users to have a public version of that, a government version of that, a version that is detached from any sort of private entity deciding what you can and cannot do, that's scary. But let's get back to Collective Shout real quick. When their efforts could actually be focused on real violence and real issues. I really don't have a problem when people like Melinda go after the massive porn industry, for instance, right? Places like The Hub, places like MindGeek, a lot of these big studios that are actually, in some cases, victimizing their talent. Her effort is greatly placed there. But the fact that she's going after the games and she's going after all this other nonsense shows me that she's more concerned with pushing the agendas that she wants than actually helping people. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about it. And if this video is long, it's because it's long in that I can't just say, I have to get every thought out there. Because this is such a nuanced topic that you have to touch upon it in a almost perfect way. So hopefully I did. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out.